In the last video, we saw examples of what I, as a senior web developer, would be doing in a project, basically putting a web form together and being able to dynamically increase the width of that form according to the viewport size to support both mobile and desktop browsers and to increase the overall width of a web form. So we also added some client-side validation to it in Angular. And in this video, I wanted to take it one step further of another great example of a real-life task that I had as a senior engineer, adding now server-side validation to that same form to offset and enhance the client-side validation. So I just want to show you an example. This was the original business form, if you remember this from last time. So it's just a couple of fields. I developed this in AngularJS. And we do have, of course, the full scale size. And you can see as I resize the browser in width that the form it shrinks and expands appropriately and takes up all the space and margin. But what I want to show you now is let's take a look at the validation for this. So you can see here we have some required fields and business name is required. And of course, we also have length validation. This is client-side validation added in Angular. You can see must be at least 4 characters and no longer than 40 characters, which it won't even let me type any more than that. And this is all client-side validation. Let me just put in the values here. We'll pick a size and we'll just pick a couple of examples. And if we are to hit submit, you can see here, if I show you the background, contact is saved, and you can see the 200 network requests that was sent along with that response. Okay, so everything is working as expected. However, what would happen if we use server-side, if somebody posted directly through the browser using REST client to the server-side part of this? So I've implemented a .NET server-side portion to this that will receive the form post request. So if we just take a quick look at the source code for this, here's the original AngularJS form. You can see this is the HTML. Right here is the input field for the business name. Here's the client-side validation that we added for business name. The length must be at least 4 characters and no longer than 40. The other fields do not have validation, but they are bound to the model. And that's important because we're going to send that request back to the server. We do have a business size, contact method, and of course some of these fields are marked as required and other ones aren't marked as required. So once this is submitted, there's the submit button right here. And you can see when this profile is submitted, we're just going to call the Angular on submit method. So just to take you really quickly through where that goes, that's in the TypeScript behind for the Angular component right here on submit. And this is going to call our Angular contact service to save the contact. Our service is defined right here. And all this is doing is just a fetch command with an HTTP post request back to the server with the form body in it. So we're going to post it to API contact, which is a C#.NET web controller. And if we get out of the clients, now that we've seen the client code, this is what I really want to show you all is the C#.NET web API controller that takes the form submission right here. So you can see it's a very simple HTTP post receiving API endpoint. We're just going to take the post data and we're just going to return a 200 OK right here. So we're taking this from a contact class. I just created a model for this. You can see here the ID is generated automatically. This is the primary key. Here's the business name, the string, the name, email. Our business size is actually a list of, the business size is a string. The contact method and services are lists of enum values, or rather a static list of strings, which I am also validating. So before we get into the server-side validation for these attributes, let's just ignore that for the moment. Let's focus right now on the business name. So you can see here, it's actually commented out this code that we're going to take a look at in just a moment. But for server-side validation, the business name currently, if you were to, let's see here, we take a look at that form again for a second. So We know that this will submit successfully, and we can show that if we take a look at the code behind it submitting. But this is with a valid business name. So what would happen if someone did a REST client and posted directly to the server-side code without and bypassing the client-side validation? So as it turns out, we can achieve that in Edge by taking one of these requests. We'll take this one. We'll go to edit and resend. And what we can do is edit the body of this request. And I will just change the business name from test business to just TES. Only 3 characters, which should violate the client side validation, which said it has to be 4 characters. Let's send that request. Okay, what do we get back? It looks like a proper response. And if we take a look at the HTTP codes, indeed we got a 200 back. So it did successfully save, and the console also printed out that it saved successfully. Actually, that won't be in the console because the Angular client-side app will print in the console, but we can see the response from the endpoint. There it is. Business name is TES, which of course should violate the request. And just to give you a little bit more context into whether this is actually doing what we say it is, let's set a breakpoint and let's replay that. Let's replay that request one more time. Edit and resend. Okay, and if we set the name again to just 3 characters and we send that request over, you can see back in VS Code that indeed it took the contact and it's going to save it with only 3 characters in the business name. So how can we fix this? Well, what we can do, so you can see it actually did save right there. So I'm going to go in now and I'm going to add server-side validation to enhance the client-side validation that we already have. So the way that we do that is I'll just add a very simple conditional check on business name dot length. We're going to make sure it's not null. Then we're going to check the length, and we're going to make sure that the length is, if the length is less than 4 characters or greater than 40, then we're going to say it must be between 4 and 40 characters. So I will restart the service. And let's take a look at what happens now if we try to make that same request. So back here, we will try and replay this data, and I will set a breakpoint in VS Code, and let's go ahead and send this request, and let's see what happens. So back in VS Code, it's caught that breakpoint. So here comes the contact, and if we look at the contact, the business name is only 3 characters because I posted directly through the REST client. So of course, this if condition is going to trigger, and we're going to get back a bad request. So we take back a look at the response. Indeed, business name must be between 4 and 40 characters. So just to do one more test of this, if we indeed put in 4 characters and send that same request again and take a look back in VS Code, you can see now we are successfully returning a response. So that's really how you can get the full response through for client-side validation and server-side validation to make sure that your web forms are protected properly from attacks, both from the server side as well as any malicious attacks, what anyone might try to submit to your web form that's not expected. Client-side validation should only be considered for beautifying and enhancing the experience for users, but it should not be considered for your core protection. For that, you need server-side validation. So one more interesting thing I just wanted to show as far as server-side validation goes is I'm also validating the values. One more time, if you just look at the web browser form, we have 3 types of preferred contacts and 3 types of services. And if the user were to post anything different than these 3 options or these 3 options, we want to show an error. So the way that we do that is I've actually set, you could do the if conditions right there on the model, but I've actually set up in on the type, I've added validation attributes. One is called valid values, and you can see I'm passing in a list of strings that correspond to the form values that are accepted, and the same for services. So this is defined in attributes, and you can see here we have valid values attribute. So all this does is it takes a list of allowed values in the constructor. This is the new format for the .NET constructor that initializes this allowed values list. And we're just converting it to lower string to lowercase for comparison to make it easy. And all we do is inside the is valid, we'll come back the model property, and we're going to check that model property to make sure. First, we're going to convert it to an enumerable just to make, if it's a single value, it'll become a list. If it's a list, it'll stay a list. And then we're going to go through the list. You can see right here. And we're just going to do a simple comparison to make sure that the value that was provided for that form field element exists within the list of allowed values. And if it doesn't, we will return an error. So let's just see if that works. Again, you can use the REST client to do this. We'll just head back into our example here, and we can actually change our services to provide not exist, not exit, a not existing value. And if we hit send, if we head into VS Code, you can see indeed this has gotten caught by our validation attribute, and it's going to throw an error of invalid value. So if we take a look back at the response, you can see here that one or more validation errors occurred, invalid value, allowed values are consulting, support, or training. So this is indeed catching the response. And likewise, if we were to go back to the form itself and just do a valid submit, you can see here that now in VS Code, we are getting validation success because the values here that are being passed in, email, is indeed a valid result, and so are the services. That was a little bit too fast. You can see here support and consulting are also valid values in the list, and so those will get a success result. If we take a look one more time at the response from the output from the request, you can see it is a 200 OK response, and we have saved the value accordingly. And of course, the one that failed was invalid value. It doesn't exist, so this was not allowed. I would recommend customizing the errors that you return rather than just outputting the default response from your validation attribute, which can leak sensitive information. So just be careful of that when you're working with this. But otherwise, this is a really great example of what you might be working on as a senior engineer or senior web developer working for a company, putting together something like this. And some of these tasks might seem easier than you would expect, but they're very important for users. They are high impact, and they're important to protect your data. They're also fun to implement, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'm happy to show you more examples of typical tasks that a senior web engineer might work on or senior web developer. So let me know in the comments below what you think, and thank you for watching.